Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land, magical, magical land. To another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Jens Heitland Show, where I meet with people to connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. My name is Jens Heitland and I am your host. I set myself a challenge for 2021 to empower 1 million people to innovate. This podcast is one of the many activities I'm doing on that journey. So if you're interested to follow me on that journey, please follow me on social media. But let me introduce our guest of today's show. He is a serial entrepreneur, venture capital master, and innovator. He is a co-founder of 2 businesses where I'm involved. Please welcome to the show, Stewart Guenther. Hey, Stewart, how are you doing?
Doing good. And yourself?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for the kind invitation. Looking forward to chatting. Great
to have you on the show. It's early morning here in Germany, and it's late evening in Silicon Valley. It's I really appreciate that you take the evening before going to bed to talk to me.
Well, one of the wonderful things about technology and innovation is you can simply ignore the fact of time zones and sense of distance. We're proving that right now.
Yeah. So before we dive into interesting topics, which I'm 100% sure we will dive into topics we have never talked about, tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and about your story.
Sure. So briefly, I guess you could say I'm a token Silicon Valley native. I'm actually born in the Silicon Valley. Rumor has it there's like 7 of us. They keep us around for like ribbon ceremonies and things like that. So I've also been around long enough to see how much the Valley has changed and continues to evolve. It's a really dynamic place. I'm extremely passionate about sharing the ethos and the successes that Silicon Valley has to offer. As much as it's a place, it really is a mindset and a set of business practices that are very replicable and can generate a lot of success anywhere in the world. And then for perfectly selfish reasons, want to see that type of success happen in more places that can lead to more successful businesses, more successful innovation, and therefore drive a lot more commerce.
So living in Silicon Valley, and for a lot of people who haven't been there, how is that? Like everyone knows it about the big companies, and everyone in innovation at least knows it and knows what's going on in Silicon Valley. How is it to live there as a private person? How do you think different than other people?
So first of all, I'm sure it goes without saying, just like everywhere else in the world, there's life before COVID and then there's life with COVID. Yeah. And so Silicon Valley, if we were to talk about what this place is like and just turn back the clock 12 months, it is extremely fast paced while being very, very chill. It is open door policy. People are very approachable. It is very much a can-do, very much a good on you and how can I be of help. You hear about don't have fear of failure. That's very, very true. It's take risks and be rewarded for that risk. That's all the positives. Mm-hmm. The other side to it, though, is because there's such a high degree of competition, it forces you to elevate what you bring to the table. Because if you don't, the rest of the sharks in the water are going to eat you up. So it really does help keep you on your toes, and it really does force the best out of you and your competition, which in turn forces the best out of you. That ethos, that spirit is still very much here. It is still very much happening despite the COVID lockdowns. It's still very much happening despite the reduction in opportunities to rub shoulders. There still is that feel. While much more of it's happening around Zoom coffee clutches, while it's happening much more around Zoom events or meetups or things like that in a virtual space, there really is still that desire to try and keep that sense of interaction going. Also, when we aren't under full lockdown, it is not untypical to see in different places folks still meeting for lunches, folks still meeting for places, because you do want to have that level of interaction and the interconnection to share ideas. That being said, there used to be, again, 12 months ago, there was a handful of places that you absolutely knew those were the places to be. whether it was downtown Palo Alto, whether it was up in San Francisco, whether it was parts of different sections of Silicon Valley. These were just kind of the go-to places to be and where you rub shoulders. And we're really seeing a shift in that. Those places are still mission critical. Those places are still places where you're going to see this type of interaction. But now there's a lot more focus around the locals, around places like Redwood City and San Mateo, or around places like Sunnyvale. It's all of these little places that have grown, the Silicon Valley has grown, but almost been forgotten. Well, because you're not driving as much, there isn't that same automatic drive to go to these different places. You're seeing a shift in where it is that people are interacting. I think what's going to be exciting to see is that when the COVID liftoff, is lifted and we're able to go back to how things are, I don't think we're just going to snap back to the old places. I think there's going to be a redoubling of that desire to interact. There's going to be a redoubling of that desire to be able to meet new people and share ideas and be challenged. And I actually think it's going to be across a larger tapestry. And I think it's going to be people have gotten used to going to their local places, and they'll be more willing and interested in inviting people to their local places rather than just going to the central hubs. And I actually think that's a good thing, because it's going to further democratize the way we engage, and it's going to actually lead to even more ideation. Yeah. And I also, by the way, think that there's no reason this can't be happening in Europe. It can't be happening in Southeast Asia. It can't be happening in central United States. Zoom works everywhere.
Yeah, true. And we have experienced that over the last, 8-9 months when we started our businesses together. But staying a little bit in Silicon Valley and merging that with entrepreneurship. So one of the topics you work with is helping entrepreneurs to be more successful and really kind of crafting them and their businesses. How is it to work with entrepreneurs from around the world to help them to start or help them to get better?
So first of all, in terms of working with international, to make that decision to move where you're comfortable, to leave your friends and family, to leave the economy and kind of the rules of the road, to then move to another place, you're already identifying yourself as a special person. To pick up sticks and go to an entirely new continent, you're identifying yourself as a special person. So whether we're talking about meeting someone who's on the cusp of making that transition or has already transitioned, there's some commonalities. Everyone's unique, but there's some commonalities in terms of drive and passion and a willingness to, what I say, charge through walls. So being able to tap into that type of energy, help refine that focus, looking at ways to be even more effective in terms of your execution. That's energizing. That's joy. Another piece to it is that's really interesting is there's almost a bifurcation in that. What I mean is there's the people who just know it and they're gonna rule the world and they have that sense of confidence, and that's great. And there are other people who feel that because they're not from the big city, because they're not from Silicon Valley, because they're not from XYZ place, that somehow it feels like they're starting off from behind. And the truth be told is, if you're willing to put in the effort and you're a quick study, there really is very little difference between the entrepreneur who's one of the other six who grew up in Silicon Valley versus the person who is visiting or is constantly here or has moved to Silicon Valley, because you can pick that up very, very quickly. So that it's really a matter of how can we do some knowledge transfer? How can we give some insights and then cut them loose and do a lot of A/B testing and then just watch them grow?
Yeah. How much? So there's this saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend most time with. How much is that like being part of the people you hang out with? Like when you're kids, you are like your friends. And how is that perspective from an entrepreneur living in and working in Silicon Valley?
So there's 2 sides to it that are mission critical, because when you're doing that crazy thing of giving up a stable, well-paying job and deciding to give up sleep and free time and put your relationships with your family and your kids at risk when you're going to make something as insane as that. And oh, by the way, at least for the first years, instead of the company paying you, you're most likely paying the company in order to be able to get it to grow. So there's all of these things where every other smart person is going, do the right thing and go do a stable job. Just go work at the same place until they give you the gold watch and send you home. So if you're always surrounded by people who are constantly reinforcing the craziness of this decision because of the risk profile, that can lead one to be more hindered or more cautious in their approach. And it's not even necessarily that they're being overt about it. It's just a matter of comparative risks. So entrepreneurs who tend to gravitate towards other entrepreneurs, and there's a distinction between risk tolerant and risk foolhardy. Risk tolerance is, you know, the risk you're taking, you're measuring what you're doing, you're constantly keeping yourself and your peer group is keeping you challenged and keeping you on edge so that you're always putting your best efforts. Those are the right type of people you want to be around. The other angle to it is, these are the type of folks that you may be able to brainstorm with, because you've most likely have either you're addressing an issue or a challenge or an opportunity, and you're, as much as you are alone, there are other people who are equally alone and can give you some insights. So I completely agree with you. You want to have at least some portion of your peer group who are on a shared journey and are there to help reinforce the crazy decision of making this startup.
From an entrepreneur perspective, there's a lot of saying, and we both have done it most probably, or definitely, that there are a lot of, like, you need to do mistakes to be able to be successful and all this kind of things. What are the mistakes you see almost every new entrepreneur coming from a large organization starting a business? What are the common mistakes you see over and over again?
So there's a few, especially if we're talking about going from a large organization to a small one. There's a need to understand what it really means to be live without a net. So large organizations tend to have a lot of common G&A, a lot of common infrastructure. They've got established processes which allow one to innovate because some of the taking out of the trash has been solved for you. So one of the first things that needs to happen is, okay, when folks say I'm chief bottle washer, toilet cleaner, and oh, by the way, the chief programmer, it really means that. And it's that willingness and that understanding of not just doing it, it's the time that it takes to do it. It's all of a sudden recognizing that all of these friction points that are killing your time that you don't necessarily plan for. Excuse me. Another piece to it is, and I don't know if mistakes is the right word. The mistake I would say is not being willing to do that A/B testing, not willing to be risky. Because again, oftentimes the things that reward you in a large organization is success built through risk mitigation. Whereas in a startup, the things that make you successful is actually embracing that risk and minimizing the risk profile by making corrective action as you learn from what you're doing. So it's remaining flexible, remaining adaptable, and then being responsive. Those are two main themes. There's a broader spectrum of that, but those are two areas that folks really should be considering. The last thing I should mention as well, when you take a look at what your idea is, if you're looking to become the CEO or if you're going to be part of the founding team, really understand what is it and how is it you're impacting your customer. How is your solution changing the behavior of the customer? And how is that being expressed in the way they're going to be shaping their wallet share? Because one of the things that folks do is they look to create what they mean to or not. They look to create and that puts a lot of time and energy and expense into a solution that may not have market feedback that's giving you the type of corrective action around pricing, around customer engagement, et cetera. And that time is honestly the single most valuable thing you have. So the faster you can put yourself at risk to then get that type of feedback, especially if it's heading you towards the pricing question, the value pricing conversation, that's really where you want to put your effort and energy. The product's never going to be perfect. Get comfortable with the product never being perfect.
Yeah, and
find where the product is sellable.
I guess that's one of the most, at least for myself, that was one of the things where, like, yeah, coming from a large organization, you're used to it need to be 99% perfect before you launch it, before you can show it to the world. And that's, at least for me, has changed my whole paradigm. Is like, yeah, let's put something out, even if it's not shiny yet, it will grow. And as a small organization, like, nobody cares in the first step. And that's completely different coming from a large organization.
I want, exactly to your point, I wonder to what extent. So we use that there needs to be 99% proof. And there's different ways different organizations address that. I wonder if that's essentially window dressing around risk mitigation.
Absolutely.
Because one of the angles to it is, until a company that was tremendously innovative, Sun Microsystems, at the height of their growth, they got to a point where they had an absolutely unbelievable IP library, true innovation within the business. But they also had a policy that if it didn't have $1 billion market, it wasn't worth the brain damage to try and commercialize it. That's a risk mitigation strategy.
Yeah.
And I got to wonder how many $1 billion markets didn't yet exist or weren't created because the innovation wasn't brought forward. But that doesn't mean someone else wasn't doing it. And all of a sudden you're behind the 8 ball because you were so busy de-risking either your market dynamic or your reputation with your customer or the perceived quality of your product. These are all de-risking mechanisms that aren't necessarily giving you access to the opportunity. And then you're in the behind as opposed to in the front of the pack.
So if you have the possibility to recommend 3 things to new, I don't want to say young, because it's not necessarily young. It's like entrepreneurs who just started. What are the 3 main points you would recommend everyone to start with and everyone to think of?
First, build an entrepreneur's network. And what I mean by that is you have the network which is going to be extremely valuable to you and a resource that you've created within your career to this point. And that's going to be valuable to the business you're building. But you actually also need to build an entrepreneur's network, because some of that network is going to be recruiting people. Some of that network is going to be recruiting sources or supplies or resources. Some of that's going to be sourcing capital. Other parts of it are going to be sourcing customers. There could be overlaps within it, but these are different types of asks than you're used to within your previous life. If you're going from a non-startuper to a startuper lifestyle, that's the first thing is recognize what that resource is. The second piece to it is really, really work on defining as succinctly as possible what it is you're doing and where the value proposition is and how it is that that's going to be monetized. What I mean by that is everyone's got a wallet. Why is it that what you're offering is going to change the way people pull money out of that wallet? And you want to be able to communicate that really, really succinctly, because that's what's going to actually help you pull that entrepreneur's network. What's in it for them? How do they understand your value proposition? How do they find a quick way to be able to be of help? And that's the third thing. Get comfortable, not just selling what you have, but actually both paying it forward and offering to help others, and even more so having an ask where others can help you. And it doesn't always have to be monetary. It could be, can you introduce me to somebody? Can you give me feedback? Can you in turn give me some insights? Can you point me to a resource? Having an ask and then also paying it forward, these are the types of trades that we put between us that really create strength within that network. So if I've communicated as effectively, all 3 of these build off of one another, and that's mission critical.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I see also how do you do this on a daily basis, still being already a long-term entrepreneur. That's not stopping, or at least that's what I'm guessing. It's like, it's part of your DNA. It's part of your life to keep that up, because it will never stop, that you need to have other entrepreneurs around you getting the ways of thinking and exchanging and learning from each other, and as well sharing the mistakes openly, because that's also things like you normally don't do in big organizations. Like you are hiding the failures, you're hiding what's not working to other companies.
And what's one of the things that there's a parallel within a large organization. There's an evolution of your career, and there's an evolution of how you engage within your network and within these things that we've talked about as you progress upwards within the organization. Just as there's that evolution within that career trajectory, there is a similar evolution when you go within starting the company, getting first revenues, generating repeatable revenues, starting to get to a large enough business where you've got to bring other people, having enough people on board that you don't have that immediate tactile connection, moving from a startup to a scale up. These aren't just words. There are fundamental step function differences in what's expected of you and how you need to interoperate within your environment. So going back to the earlier three things, all of those three things, the network you're going to build, your ability to communicate where you're at, and how it is you interact with asks, those also elevate as your status of your business elevates. Being able and comfortable to understand where the boundaries of these things are and recognizing you have a new learning journey, a new evolutionary journey, a new opportunity to grow with each one of these steps, that's going to be really important in terms of revitalizing yourself. Because one of the things, I'll kind of jump ahead here, another aspect to it is you may find, so people think that they're Bill Gates. People think that they're Zuckerberg. People think that they're Larry Ellison. Or Steve Jobs. These people are very, very unique in that they were not just capable of working within a company that elevated from three guys in a pizza shack to a multi-billion-dollar business, but they actually had the interest and the willingness to evolve with the company and abandon things that they were passionate about before to grow into other things and find new passions. So one of the things that, going back to an earlier question about mistakes or a earlier question about concerns that people have, there is a difference of what you need to do and what's expected of you if you're a startupper looking to create your first $1 million versus if you're a scale-upper and you're looking to scale your business from $25 to $50 million. You're spending a tremendous amount of time on product and market and customer engagement and guerrilla marketing, doing whatever it takes to build yourself up to get to that first $1 million. You're spending a tremendous amount of time focusing on metrics and scalability and spreadsheets and the ability to communicate your business from a finance mindset. And not everybody's interested in giving up that guerrilla marketing piece to live in the land of spreadsheets. And if that's not you, that's not a problem. That's a success, because then you can start to plan your succession plan so you can find the person who is willing to go through the brain damage of spreadsheets, and then you can go start the next company and get back into guerrilla marketing that you're passionate about.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point, because and as well, like a bit of my learning is like you start with an idea and then you really do that and you believe in it, and that's good. So it's kind of, you start something that drives you into one direction, but what a lot of people, and that's maybe a little bit comparable to large organization. Like I have been working, not myself, but let's say someone is working in marketing his or her whole life, and it's kind of progressing in that career inside of marketing in the different organizations and moving. When you're an entrepreneur, then you start one business and drive that. But most probably, if you are at least an entrepreneur like we are, then it's like you do other businesses on the side, and one might be bigger than the other business. But it's not just, hey, I'm working in marketing. It's, hey, I'm working in marketing. I'm working in development. I'm working in construction. I'm working in cleaning. So it's like you can use your way of thinking. You can use your capabilities in completely different businesses and even different industries if you're into that things, which for me is also an interesting way of growing. But it also shows that you need to spread your way of thinking into different ways to get cross references, get ideas from other businesses. At least that's the way how I do it, and that's the way how I think. How do you see that for entrepreneurs who are getting started, or for yourself?
So if I can, let me riff on that and actually take it one step back. So let's say that you're someone listening to us and you're actually still within a large organization and you're making that decision that at some point you want to be a startupper. And it's something a little bit longer than the next 24 hours. One of the things that you might choose to do is within a large organization, if you're in an organization and you're in a role in which you can gain exposure to different parts of the organization. If this is something where, yes, I want to do that, but I still have time, then one of the things that you might consider is using your current role to add value to the large organization and navigate through the organization to deliberately put yourself in new roles, to expose yourself to new skill sets, essentially learn on the company's dime, demonstrate how you can quickly add value within that existing system, reverse engineer how that existing system works, that you can have an impact on it, and then take away from that key insights, whether it is key insights into what they're doing right, key insights into what they're doing wrong that you could do better, ways that you're finding process creation and repeatability that is going to be useful. Because this type of reverse engineering, especially on the process piece, this is going to be mission critical in terms of your business. I started the conversation around risk, comfort, and about a willingness to be nimble. You talked about the importance in an entrepreneur of being responsive, being flexible, and these are all very, very true. What's the best of all is having all of that layer and still have the ability to put your head above the fray and look at the processes you can put in place that allow you to start to automate things. Yeah. Because time is going to be the single most precious thing you have. Something you do very, very well is that you articulate quickly what it is others can do for you, and then you delegate that. As an entrepreneur, the ability to do that is mission critical. And there's some skill sets that are important. You need to understand what you're trying to do. You need to be able to synthesize and communicate in chunks what other people can do for you. You got to put a boundary around it, and you got to convince someone else to do it. That sounds really easy, but try and do that across a spectrum of processes, a spectrum of disciplines while you're trying to install the brakes flying down the freeway, right? So these are some things that you definitely want to be comfortable building that out. And then ultimately it's what is the repeatability of the process? Because what we haven't gotten to yet is you manage what you measure and you measure what you manage. When you're in the pure entrepreneurial side and it's frenetic and it's free flowing and it feels free, that's awesome. And that's a tremendous way to work 75 to 80 hours a day and work 9 to 10 days a week. And you're just frantic. It's having that ability to compartmentalize it down, create systems to buy yourself time, because buying yourself time is going to allow you to do just more.
Yeah. 100%. This is one of the...
It's going to make you successful.
Yeah. This is one of the things I realized fairly quickly, coming from a large organization. I see that a lot with people I coach. Coming from a large organization, most of the people I coach are like coming from a management position. So they have had direct reports, people underneath, and sometimes even thousands of people underneath. Then they're jumping into their own business. Let's say someone jumps into, hey, I'm doing consultancy or whatever. Then they're jumping from having a lot of people working for them to, hey, shit, now I'm alone. How do I do that? And I think that's to that point is you will not be good in everything. So you need to fairly quickly figure out what are the things you do yourself you want and need to learn. Like for one example I did, it's like I started to build my website in my own time. And I was just seeing how much time building a website, if you have never done it, eats from your day. So these are all times you don't spend with your customers, which you don't spend in developing your business going forward. And now I'm basically have outsourced all of that. I'm not touching it. So it was a learning process for me as well, where I said, yeah, I start and let's figure that out. And that's really, like you said, it's like find a system that helps you to delegate, and find a system that helps you to multiply yourselves or your ways of thinking, and that you can focus and as well step out in between, where you are not the the bottleneck of the business. You need to design it from the beginning in that way. That's why I will do an episode on a virtual assistant in January, diving into that topic with someone who is educating virtual assistant and how that system works. It will be an interesting episode as well. But
I look forward to watching it.
Yeah, I hope it will come out around the third week in January. So moving from entrepreneurship a bit more towards innovation, how do you connect the dots of innovation, being in Silicon Valley, being from an innovation perspective in one of the famous places where innovation happens on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. So innovation is one of those words that means all things to all people. And therefore it can, at the same time, it can lose some of that strength. So first we should talk about what do we mean by innovation and how does that create some flow throughs? So Silicon Valley is the land of the moonshot. Silicon, what that means is several things. It's before there was Uber. No. Before there was Airbnb, was there Airbnb? These are all things that have changed stuff around. Well, one way of looking at it is Airbnb and Uber have fundamentally transformed the way key industries work. They have shaped behavior, they've changed expectations, and that in turn has affected not just a vertical, but a supply chain associated with that vertical.
Yeah.
So when we talk about innovation that is literally going to change societal behavior, consumption behavior, business behavior, that has its own set of expectations around it. And that's where you're getting the type of interest from venture capitalists, the type of interest from large corporations, the type of interest from private equity, because they're expecting small levers of input having a large impact on a segment of the economy. Those things exist. There are a lot of people going in that space. Innovation can also mean on the other side of the spectrum, a way of looking at things that are being done that they've always been done that way, but simply adjusting the process to either remove friction or to increase speed or to transfer who or what is doing it, that in turn creates efficiencies that may not have the same vast impact. We're talking about these moonshots, but that doesn't mean they're not going to have a cascading value. So email was one of the first killer apps. Email ended up changing radically the way we interact. But when you look at it from its beginning, it was simply replacing what we did in memo and what we put on paper and put it into a digital form to send to somebody. And that simple change of process allowed a whole set of other innovations to cascade on top of it. So when we think about innovation, part of what we should be also addressing is and being comfortable with what is the scope of the innovation we're going after. And that in turn should also shape how it is we want to address that innovation in terms of investment and then ultimately commercialization. So another part of this as well, innovation is change. Innovation is impact on business processes. True. Innovation we keep hearing about is always monetizable. It is always commercializable. It doesn't mean it's necessarily a first order element. Again, like email is not in and of itself. We're not paying for email the way we used to pay for the post and putting a stamp on it. But it created a whole set of new consumption engines and new monetization engines on top of it. So creating that understanding, having that ability to understand how it's going to shape behavior and then monetizing these other behavior changes, that's where you have the opportunity to create value. A brief example of that is Google. Google was not the first search engine. Google was by no means the first one to try and offer better solutions for you. Google was the first one to figure out how to generate money off of search. And because of that, that transformed the way we think about data, think about our engagement with data, and created a whole slew of additional monetization structures and engines around it. It's understanding these things, compartmentalizing it correctly, and going back to an earlier point, your ability to very quickly and succinctly explain what it is you're doing is usually a good identifier that you're on the right track.
Yeah. So what are the mistakes, or what do you struggle most with in innovation?
two things that immediately come to mind. Confusing innovation with pain mitigation. And you'd be amazed at how common that is. Innovating because something frustrates me is powerful. But if I'm innovating something to change my pain level, who's the real customer? So if I run around making my life better and try and sell it to other people, there's a basic misalignment. So innovation, how is it having an effect? And what is the cascading effect? So those are the two pieces to it, is best aligning what that pain point, what that problem point is. And then the second piece to it is really identifying the solution set. And this can be as simply identified as, is this a feature or a product? Is this a system or an ecosystem? And the big one, we can just start with feature or product. And being a feature is not in and of itself necessarily a bad thing, but it most likely is going to be communicating your time window of being able to capture. And so it's kind of a get in, get quick, get out, right? So a feature, if you're thinking about this as a Swiss Army knife, a feature could be as simple as, hey, there was a period of time where all of a sudden adding a USB stick on a Swiss Army knife was a genius idea. That's just a feature, right? But there was a period of time where it was treated as a product and you were paying extra money to be able to buy a Swiss Army knife that had a USB stick on it. And that was simply a packaging question. It was an innovation around a packaging question that made it interesting. Getting in quickly and then understanding that you got a limited time horizon, sell that off to the right folks, because it's just a feature. No one's thinking about it anymore about wanting to have a USB stick, let alone wanting to have a USB stick on a knife.
Yeah, true. So what's working and what's not working from with innovation right now?
Innovate. So there's two answers to that. Innovation, which is again demonstrating behavior change. So innovation, so it's concrete. Innovation that is a mindset change. There's a lot of soft power associated with that, because I'm talking about concrete behavior changes. Well, there's also innovation around everything from training to knowledge transfer to employee engagement to intercompany communications. There are ways you can be innovative in this space. An example of that is Facebook actively invites people to come and spend time with them, and they do their best they can to knowledge transfer to others, to copy their practices and copy their business practices. And they're genuinely trying to help these other companies become more successful and more efficient in what they're doing. And that's a perfectly selfish reason, because as these other companies align with the same practices that Facebook is doing, there's going to be greater synergy, greater ability to interact with them, regardless of whether they're customers, vendors, or even competitors. So that's one form of innovation. The other piece to it, though, is if you're looking at innovation that's going to be changing, have either an impact on the bottom line within the organization or having an impact on the top line. If you're looking to become a product organization, what is that value chain and how is it you're appropriately attracting that to pricing? Monetization. Nothing proves that you're adding value like somebody paying for it. And the very next thing is, what is about your innovation that's creating a demand pull? It's not just a matter of push, this adds value. Why is it that this innovation is changing behavior, which is creating an addiction metric that is causing them not just to say, I want more from you, but again, going back to an example of Facebook, I want my customers to get more from you. I want my competitors to get more from you. I want everyone to get more from you because it makes my life easier. These are different levels of impact and value that you're driving from innovation.
So if you would have the chance, which you have, supporting a company or building a company yourself, which has an impact on everyone on planet Earth, what company, what product, what would be the thing about?
So I'll give you three themes. So I don't know if we've talked about this. give you three themes. I believe voice is one of the coming killer apps. Mm. And that has to do with the fact that I'm just copying Elon, he's right. Our primary data interface is 8 fingers and 2 thumbs. Mm. The advent of the cell phone has turned us into 2 thumbs. Mm. So our data interchange rate is actually much smaller. And when we are adding machine learning and ultimately adding artificial intelligence as helpers into the mix, we are even further behind. And so our fastest path before they hardwire us, our fastest path to increase that data interchange is actually through voice. So things related to voice and using voice as a killer app is a mission critical one. Mm. The second piece to that would be things that help us, if nothing else, simulate, if not create, more honest information flows. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of talk about what is the quality of information. There's also another piece to it. How is it that our own perceptions are shaping our interaction with information? And how is that causing us to expand or contract our willingness to consume information? So things which can serve to the consumer in a semi-curated way while actually encouraging them to expand their knowledge set, expand their consumption set, because systems are designed to be hyper-specific. I get greater efficiency by serving more of exactly what you want. But what that actually does is it creates a narrow casting of the information streams and makes us all hyper-specialized at the risk of losing fidelity of insights, fidelity of understanding, thinking outside of the box. And going back to innovation, if you got blinders on, it's a heck of a lot harder to innovate than if you've got some aspect of a jack of all trades to be able to apply different frames on how it is you're looking at things to make that connection that's outside of the box thinking that allows you to approach the problem from a different angle or change a behavior model, leads to greater efficiencies. When we're narrowcasted, we're just going to be making more iterative solutions. We're not going to be approaching the problem differently. So things that can facilitate that are tremendous. Is that kind of the level of detail you were looking for?
Yeah. So slowly getting towards an end. If we look forward now, we're in December 2020. Where will you be in a year from now, and what has happened?
I will be even more virtual. We all will be even more virtual. Even as we are reconnecting with terra firma wherever we're at. And what I mean by that is this is not going away. We're speaking to each other with 7,000 kilometers between us.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you in Tomorrowland, and we're having a conversation as if we're about to go to Phil's Coffee down the street in Silicon Valley. So that's a virtual element to it. Moreover, we're getting more and more comfortable, as you talked about, with digital assistants, virtual assistants. Digital assistants are the next logical extension of that. They're not going to replace the virtual assistant, but we are now becoming more comfortable offering more decision trees to algorithms to try and help us buy ourselves time or convenience or something else. So we're going to be layering in, I'm not talking about Jetsons, but we're just going to be layering in more of these things within our lives. And then for me personally, I'm going to be very much looking to, and the reason why I say virtual is important, I think that Silicon Valley is a place in the internet. And I think we're being trained now that there is tremendous value coming here. No question about it. And when we reopen and we get to rub shoulders again, there's no question of tremendous value of being here. Your access to corporates, your access to capital, your access to like-minded people, your access to top quality talent, your access to the competition to learn from them and compete with them or be bought by them, your access to customers. There are few places on the planet that have this concentration of these things. But we've also now had a force multiplier in other parts of the world to create similar environments in other places. whether it's in Berlin, whether it's in London, whether it's in Singapore, whether it's in many, many different places. These always had the competition of, if you really want Silicon Valley, get on a plane. You can't do that right now. And so there's no reason not to get more comfortable finding your version and creating your version of Silicon Valley in a more regional approach. So the virtual for me is, from both a passion and where I think the future is going, how is it that Silicon Valley becomes a layer on the internet? How is it Silicon Valley becomes a layer within the entrepreneurial stack? And how is that in turn creating greater efficiencies and speed to success for like-minded entrepreneurs globally?
Cool. So if there's one or two books you would recommend entrepreneurs to read, or a topic to dive into, what would be a book you would recommend?
I would say two elements. Pick up from Peter Zihan, Disunited Nations. That's a geopolitics based on economics book. And the reason why I recommend this is that's talking about a change in how the global economic structures may transpire. I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but it's communicating a major shift in how what we've seen as normal will be put in a different frame. And the reason why that's valuable is, if you're an entrepreneur, you want to look for the cracks in systems. You want to look for the changes in the coming wave, so that you can either surf that coming wave, provide safe harbor from that coming wave, or gain some sort of push from that wave. So that's the one piece I would look at it. The next one, as I would say, if you're looking to be an entrepreneur and you're going to be venture relevant, meaning you're looking to raise venture capital, you're looking to use OPM, other people's money, and you believe that your business is going to be one of the future unicorns. If you're looking for nuts and bolts type stuff, I would look for things like books from Brad Feld in terms of how you navigate the early startup environment from a venture capitalist perspective. I would become comfortable with the lean startup. I think everyone's familiar with that. There are a couple other books that kind of build around that. I would just start that as a vision quest. It's hard to give you just two.
No, I know, but it's always, I get a lot asked about, like, what are the books I should read, and here and there. And for me, it's always, because I'm a reader myself, or now audiobook listener even more. One thing is like consuming all of that, but the other thing is as well, you need to bring it into action, because just understanding the book doesn't help you to do anything. If you're not doing it yourself, if you're not putting yourself out there, then it's also a limiting factor, because sitting on the couch and reading will not help you to build your business. So you need to use it as well.
Can I add one last book?
Yes.
Can I add one last book?
Yes.
I may be butchering the title. It's written by Scott Adams, who is the cartoonist creator of Dilbert. And he wrote a book that I believe is called How to Lose at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. It's a semi-autobiographical book. And going back to the theme that we've talked about in terms of folks who are looking to perhaps leave a large organization and become an entrepreneur. One of the things that I really like about that book, that's in particular, if you're thinking of making that jump, is Scott Adams talks about something called talent stacks. And this is kind of a build off of what I mentioned earlier of, if you've got the time and the appetite to bounce between different parts of the organization to gain different insights, a big part of it is actually building this talent stack. Because an entrepreneur, by the very nature, he or she is going to be reliant on his talent stack in order to be able to fake it till you make it, bounce between different need sets as an entrepreneur, create new skill sets on the fly based on either what's needed by the customer or what's needed by the situation. And you're always going to be wanting to learn, to expand that talent stack as your company evolves. So understanding those frames, understanding the value behind that, and how that is a shift, for especially if you're coming from an industry or coming from a corporation, which has been really, really rewarding you for increased specialization each time you go up the level. Focusing on the talent stack and talent stack development is going to be a key skill as you look to navigate to a new frame of operation.
Yeah, that's awesome. I could spend 2 hours more with you, but in interest of your time as well, and it's very late for you already. Thank you very much for being with me and spending the rough hour with me. So where can people find you, follow you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. They can look me up on all the usual social media. They can find me associated with you and Unlock 2020. They can also find me associated with VC PERT. I look forward to chatting with you some more. And I wish much success to your audience. And as you discover and build the next Google, look me up.
Thank you, Stewart, very much. So, and for the listeners out there, thanks you for listening. My name is Jens Heitland. And if you like this episode, please share it with everyone you think who could like it as well. And follow me on social media. Thank you very much and see you next time.
Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land, magical, magical land. To another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical.